A very fresh morning to one and all present here. Myself Zainab Kagdi from Atimiya Green School, Jadeshwar, Bharuch. We are back with English subject for class 7th. As you can see on the screen, the quest for El Dorado. So today we will begin with the revision for your periodic test 2. So Unit 2, the lessons which are going to come in your exams are Unit 2, Wanderlust, Section 1, The Quest for El Dorado, Section 2, The Diary of a Space Traveler by Satyajit Ray, Section 3, Trains by Humayun Kabir, Unit 3, Real Life Heroes, Section 1, The One Who Survived Ada Blackjack, Section 2, The Narayanpur Incident by Shashi Deshpande. Okay, so these 5 lessons are going to come from Unit 2 and Unit 3. So we will discuss each lesson day by day along with the grammar chapters which are going to come in your exams. So today we'll begin with Unit 2, Wanderlust. Wanderlust means a strong desire to travel. Correct? A person who loves traveling and who is very fond of traveling is considered as wanderlust. So we'll begin with section 1, the quest for El Dorado. Read on to learn about the quest undertaken in search of the city of gold El Dorado. So here this city El Dorado is considered as a city of gold, as you can see in the picture, that everything is made of gold, that buildings are all made up of gold. So everyone loves gold, correct? And we are very much fond of gold. And the gold is a very precious metal, so it is very expensive. So everybody are crazy about gold just because it is very expensive and everybody loves it. So this city, El Dorado, everyone was in search of this city. So let us read how they found out the city and what all efforts they put in to reach up to this city. It was the promise of wealth beyond measure that lured the explorers. They traveled to seek out El Dorado, the mythical city of gold that was supposedly located in the unexplored interior of South America. El Dorado was believed to be unimaginably rich with dazzling gold paved streets, golden temples, and rich mines of gold and silver. As you can see that El Dorado was a city of gold, and it was believed, okay, it was just believed that it is this city is to be unimaginably rich with dazzling gold streets, golden temples, and rich mines of gold and silver. So every explorer were in search of this city so that they could be rich and they could provide plenty of gold and silver for the people of their city. There were fanciful tales about a mighty city where billets of gold lay about in heaps. Billets means bars. So there were fanciful tales about this mighty city where bars of gold lay about in heaps as if they were logs of wood marked out to burn. So as if we keep the logs of woods which are marked out to burn, in the same way there were bars of gold about in heaps. So this city was amazing city which was full of gold. So between 1530 and 1650 AD, thousands of Europeans searched the jungles, plains, mountains, and rivers of South America for El Dorado. So between 1530 and 1650, there were thousands of Europeans who searched the jungles, plains, mountains, rivers, everything for this El Dorado city. An expedition would begin typically in a town on the Spanish coast. A charismatic and influential individual would announce his intention to go forth in search of the fabled wealth. Fabled means imaginary wealth of El Dorado. So here the people who were very charismatic, means attractive and impressive and very influential, they would announce that they want to go in search of this imaginary wealth of El Dorado. Everywhere from 100 to 700 Europeans, mostly Spaniards, would sign up bringing their own armor, weapons, and horses. At times, they would take livestock, that means animals, to slaughter and eat along the way. Fighting dogs were also brought along, as they were useful when fighting the indigenous, that means native population of the continent. Now, uh, while moving in search of this El Dorado, what they used to face, that the native people were very harmful and very violent. They thought that, and if they want to fight against them, so they used to take wild animals along. They used to take fighting dogs with them, and for eating purpose, they used to take livestock, that means farm animals, to slaughter them and eat along the way. So these were their preparations for going to El Dorado. Once on South American soil, the expedition would heap off into the jungle and would last any length of time from a few months to few years. On the way, these explorers would meet native inhabitants and who would be either tortured or piled with gifts in the pursuit of information. Now, these native people of the village, now native inhabitants, they were living in that village and they used to provide them lots of information. But in return, now these people who were explorers, who were going in search of the expedition and who were going in search of the El Dorado city, they used to torture these people in order to get the information. Or if they are good enough, they would give them piles of gift in return against the information. Correct? So they used to get tortured or they used to get gifts. The natives would point in any direction and send them on their way, having learned that it was the best way to get rid of these rude and violent men. Now, what do these people used to do? These natives used to do, if they are tortured and if they want to get rid of these people who are coming again and again and asking for El Dorado and information about the further way, so they used to point in any direction and they used to misguide them so that they can get rid of them, they can get rid of these rude and violent men. Meanwhile, illnesses, desertions, and attacks would whittle down the expedition. Now, desertion means act of living without permission. Okay, so this illnesses, this desertion means the people in their community who went together for this finding of this city, for exploring this city, they would leave without permission so that they become alone, and attacks would whittle down this expedition. So there were many dangers coming on their way while going to their destination. Nevertheless, the expeditions proved surprisingly resilient, means able to withstand braving mosquito infested swamps, angry natives, blazing heat on the plains, flooded rivers, and dangerous mountain passes. They had to cross all these things, they had to face all these problems in order to move ahead. Eventually, when their numbers dwindled or the leader died, the expedition would give up and return home. So now they used to give up when, in two circumstances. Number one, when their numbers dwindled, that means they used to be very less in number because everyone used to desert them because they rest of the people give up on the way, and or when the leader of the expedition died at that time, because it took from few months to few years, and meanwhile if the leader dies, then the expedition would end up and the remaining people used to return home. Of the Spanish adventurers, the most persistent was a bold explorer named Antonio de Berrio. He set out with 700 horsemen, but the route was difficult and exhausting. The natives usually hostile, and many of the men and horses died or were slain. The surviving men were so weary and eager to return home that Berrio was forced to give up his quest. So there was a young man, very bold explorer named Antonio de Berrio. He set out with 700 horsemen, but the route was very much difficult and exhausting, and the natives usually hostile them, and many of the men and horses died or were slain. So the surviving men were very much eager to return to home, so he had to give up. He then settled on the island of Trinidad as governor. Then he settled on this island where Trinidad, a person was worked as a governor. The next to try his luck was the 42-year-old Walter Raleigh, who attempted the adventure which Berrio had failed to see through. Raleigh had sent out various expeditions but had never crossed the ocean himself. So the next one who tried his luck was 42-year-old Walter Raleigh, who attempted the adventure which Berrio had failed to see through. Raleigh had sent out various expeditions, but he had never crossed the ocean himself. He now decided to seek this land of gold. In February 1595, he set sail from Plymouth with a fleet of 5 well-supplied vessels, okay, taking with him about 100 gentlemen adventurers in addition to crew members. Now 100 adventurers along with the crew members, he went out for this expedition. Raleigh's fleet was captured soon after and was quickly deprived of its cargo. About 2 months later, Raleigh sighted the hills of Trinidad. His eyes rested for the first time on the shores of that new world in which he had so long taken a keen interest. This new world is Earth's western hemisphere, specifically the Americans. So his fleet was captured. He went out with some vessels. How many vessels? Well supplied 5 vessels, and this was captured and he was deprived of its cargo. Then after 2 months later, Raleigh sighted the hills of Trinidad. Governor Berrio had treated Raleigh with every courtesy, talking freely about his expedition and giving Raleigh a good deal of very useful information. Now this Governor Berrio, who left that expedition in the middle because of the failure of his man, and because of uh, very few members were left in his crew. So Governor Berrio treated this Raleigh very nicely with a lot of courtesy and talked everything and gave every information to Raleigh. Raleigh learned that his ships could not be taken up to Orinoco on account of the sandbanks at its mouth and its dangerous channels. Okay, now Raleigh learned that his ships, he had 5 vessels, correct? He had 5 vessels. Yes, 5 well-supplied vessels, and so he cannot take the ship along with them to the Orinoco on account of the sandbanks or its mouth, because of the sandbanks and its dangerous channels. He therefore felt it necessary to leave the ships at Trinidad and cross to the mainland in the boats he had brought with him. 100 men were chosen for the journey, while the others were left to guard the fleet. Okay, so only 100 men were chosen for the journey. An old galley, a barge, a ship's boat, and 2 wherries carried them, along with a young native pilot who was familiar with the coast. But stormy weather hindered the voyagers, and they were glad enough to enter one of the mouths of the river and escape the seething ocean. But here new troubles surrounded them that Raleigh described later in his account of the expedition. Okay, so Here it is said that he selected 100 men for the journey, while others were left to guard the fleet. And an old galley, that means old flat ship, he took along with him, a ship's boat, and 2 berries. Berries means all various kinds of seafaring vessels, along with a young native pilot who was familiar with the coast. But stormy weather they faced means made it difficult for them to move further. He wrote about his expedition that if God had not sent us help, we might have wandered a whole year in that labyrinth of rivers. So he said he is very much thankful to the God that if he had not sent us help, then we might have wandered a whole year in that labyrinth of rivers before we had found any way. And if we went by the sun or compass, hoping thereby to go directly one way or the other, yet that way also we were carried in a circle among multitudes of islands. Every island was so bordered with big trees as no man could see any farther than the breadth of the river or length of the branch. Okay, so he said that he was very much thankful to the God that if he had not sent help, then they might wander around for one whole year. Okay, so every island there was so much of difficulty while moving ahead, as the borders, every island was so much bordered with big trees that no man could see any farther than the breadth of the river or length of the branch. So they could not see further. They had to take each step very wisely. Okay. The pilot proved to be useless in these maze of waterways, but they were fortunate to meet 3 other natives, who became friendly when they found they had nothing to fear from the strange white man. One of them was an old man who knew the river thoroughly. Presents and kind words induced him to guide the voyagers past the obstacles. So you can see that the presents and kind words, okay, these these 3 people to guide them directly, to guide the voyagers past the obstacles. So the pilot proved to be useless in these maze of waterways, but they were fortunate that they found 3 natives who became friendly when they found that these people are not harmful, these strange white men are not harmful, but they are good friends of them. So out of these 3 natives, one was an old man who knew the river thoroughly, so that helped them. Okay, so we'll continue the story in our next class. So I'll ask you to reread this lesson, as the question answers will come from inside of the lesson, not only from the exercise of your course book and your grammar book and workbook. So make sure you read each and every line of your textbook and understand the lesson thoroughly, as any question can be asked from the lesson. So in order for the better understanding, so I'll give you one video for the story up till now. So enjoy the video and watch the video completely.
Of the Spanish adventurers, the most persistent was a bold explorer named Antonio de Berrio. He set out with 700 horsemen, but the route was difficult and exhausting. The natives usually hostile, and many of the men and horses died or were slain. The surviving men were so weary and eager to return home that Berrio was forced to give up his quest. He then settled on the island of Trinidad as governor. The next to try his luck was the 40-year-old Walter Raleigh, who attempted the adventure which Berrio had failed to see through. Raleigh had sent out various expeditions but had never crossed the ocean himself. He now decided to seek this land of gold. In February 1595, he set sail from Plymouth with a fleet of 5 well-supplied vessels, taking with him about 100 gentlemen adventurers in addition to the crew members. Raleigh's fleet was captured soon after and was quickly deprived of its cargo. About 2 months later, Raleigh sighted the hills of Trinidad. His eyes rested for the first time on the shores of that new world in which he had so long taken a keen interest. Governor Berrio here treated Raleigh with every courtesy, talking freely about his expedition and giving Raleigh a good deal of very useful information. Raleigh learned that his ships could not be taken up the Orinoco on account of the sandbanks at its mouth and its dangerous channels. He therefore felt it necessary to leave the ships at Trinidad and cross to the mainland in the boats he had brought with him. 100 men were chosen for the journey, while the others were left to guard the fleet. An old galley, a barge, a ship's boat, and 2 wherries carried them, along with a young native pilot who was familiar with the coast. But stormy weather hindered the voyagers, and they were glad enough to enter one of the mouths of the river and escape the seething ocean. But here, new troubles surrounded them that Raleigh described later in his account of the expedition. He wrote, "If God had not sent us help, we might have wandered a whole year in that labyrinth of rivers, ere we have found any way, and if we went by the sun or compass, hoping thereby to go directly one way or the other, yet that way also we were carried in a circle among multitudes of islands. Every island was so bordered with big trees, as no man could see any farther than the breadth of the river or length of the branch. The pilot proved to be useless in the maze of waterways. But they were fortunate to meet 3 other natives, who became friendly when they found that they had nothing to fear from the strange white men. One of them was an old man who knew the river thoroughly. Presents and kind words induced him to guide the voyagers past the obstacles. Resting that night on a little knoll on the wooden banks of the stream, they were off again early the next morning. The river was still swift and violent, and the banks were so crowded with trees and high reeds that they could not land, and were almost stifled from the closeness of the air. After 4 hard and weary days, the explorers reached a smooth channel and found they could proceed more easily. But the tropical heat grew more oppressive each day. They began to complain bitterly, and Raleigh had to use all his powers of persuasion in order to induce them to go on. Yet the country was in many ways beautiful. Here and there the woods ceased, and broad plains spread out, covered with luxuriant herbage, amid which rose at intervals groves of beautiful trees. Graceful deer would come down to the water's edge and gaze fearlessly on the travelers with their big, soft eyes. On the banks of the rivers, says Raleigh, were fruits good to eat, flowers too, and variety of trees we